Good evening. Welcome to our Wednesday night Bible study here at Bethany Baptist Church, and I'm glad you've joined us today. For the last 2 years now, we have been going through the book of Psalms. We cover a different psalm every Wednesday night, and we ask 20 questions of that psalm. And so we're continuing to do that as we go through our time here with the virus, and so we hope that this will be a help to anybody that's able to watch. And I hope that as you study through the psalm in a systematic way, that it really does bring some light to the psalm and helps us understand what the author was trying to get us to understand. And so as we go through this psalm, Psalm 101, you can see we've been through quite a few already. We ask the psalm these questions. So first I'm going to read it. It's a psalm of David. I will sing of steadfast love and justice. To you, O Lord, I will make music. I will ponder the way that is blameless. O when will you come to me? I will walk with integrity of heart within my house. I will not set before my eyes anything that is worthless. I hate the work of those who fall away. It shall not cling to me. A perverse heart shall be far from me. I will know nothing of evil. Whoever slanders his neighbor secretly I will destroy. Whoever has a haughty look and an arrogant heart I will not endure. I will look with favor on the faithful in the land, that they may dwell with me. He who walks in the way that is blameless shall minister to me. No one who practices deceit shall dwell in my house. No one who utters lies shall continue before my eyes. Morning by morning I will destroy all the wicked in the land, cutting off all the evildoers from the city of the Lord. So we're going to ask 20 questions of this psalm of David's. The first question that we ask is, who wrote the psalm? Which we like it when the title gives away who wrote the psalm. So we see this one is a psalm of David. And so as David wrote this psalm, it kind of gives us some light to the time period and everything else. The second question is, to whom did the author write this psalm? This psalm appears to be written directly to the Lord. It is David making promises to the Lord. It starts off with verse 1, speaking of what he's going to do. I'm going to sing of steadfast love and justice. To you, O Lord, I will make music. And then he goes on to have several comments of what it is that he is going to be promising to do. And those questions, or those statements, those promises are all important to David as he lives his life. Now, when did the author write this psalm? This gives us some insight into the psalm a little bit, and is going to give some, also probably answer the question of why, which is our next question. But there's a lot of people that believe that David wrote this psalm at the beginning of his kingdom, of his being king. When you look at this psalm in that light, I think it makes some sense and really goes well with our Sunday morning message, by the way. The idea is that David is promising what kind of king he would be. Now, when you read through that without understanding, let me do that so you can just read through it without understanding. If this is written at the beginning of David's kingdom, or being king, and now he is making promises concerning what kind of king he's going to be, I think it really opens up the meaning of this psalm, and also makes sense of why it doesn't necessarily apply that we shouldn't be making the same promises. Okay, so I will sing of steadfast love and justice. To you, O Lord, I will make music. I will ponder the way that is blameless. O when will you come to me? I will walk with integrity of heart within my house. I will not set before my eyes anything that is worthless. I hate the work of those who fall away. It shall not cling to me. A perverse heart shall be far from me. I will know nothing of evil. Whoever slanders his neighbor secretly, I will destroy. Obviously, that's something that not everyone has an opportunity to do, but a king would have that right, I guess. Whoever has a haughty look and an arrogant heart, I will not endure. I will look with favor on the faithful in the land, that they may dwell with me. He who walks in the way that is blameless shall minister to me. No one who practices deceit shall dwell in my house. No one who utters lies shall continue before my eyes. Morning by morning I will destroy all the wicked in the land, and cutting off all the evildoers from the city of the Lord. So you can see when you read that without understanding that this is a promise of a king to God of how it is that he's going to reign, it really opens up that psalm to help us understand it. And so I think that's a really good explanation of this psalm and its purpose. And so, all right. So then when we look at why did the psalmist write this psalm, our question number 4, I think it makes sense then. This is a commitment to God of how he's going to reign. Remember, David had a bad example before him of how someone reigned. Saul was not a great example of a king. He did not reign in a way that would follow that. And so I think David at the beginning of his being king, I think it makes sense. At the beginning of his reign, he's saying to God, God, I'm not going to do those things. I saw Saul do these things, and that wasn't good. I'm not going to do that now. And so I think that's a good reason of why he wrote this psalm. It's that commitment. Our 5th question is, are there any repeated words or phrases? Well, we see a few words repeated. Shall is a verb, but it reminds us of, again, the promise nature of this psalm. Because he's talking about what he shall do. All right, shall and will are repeated several times throughout this psalm, and so I think that really shows us again the point of the psalm, which is interesting all throughout this study, or these studies, I should say. That question really leads to the purpose of the psalm again and again and again. We also see heart and blameless and land. All of those words are repeated throughout this psalm, and they show us that this is exactly what David is trying to do. He's trying to keep his heart blameless, and he's talking about the land of Israel that he's committing to work through. So when you look at all those things, it all makes sense. What questions are being asked? That's our 6th question. Well, we see one question in this psalm in verse 2. Oh, when will you come to me? Now that's directed to the Lord, so it's a question that God gives, or that David gives to God, of when are you going to come to me? And I think the point here is that David has connected this idea of his right standing and doing what's right before God, these commitments that we see in this psalm, and making the connection between those commitments and that way he's going to reign and God's presence. What do we see with Saul? Saul finally disobeyed God, lied to God, disobeyed to God, or tried to lie to God. You know you can't lie to God. He knows, right? But he disobeyed God and then lied about it. And God left Saul. And so David sees that connection and says, I don't want that. Instead, I want you to come. I want your presence to be a part of my reign. And he says, these are the things that I'm going to do because I know this is what you desire for your kings. And so I think that's an interesting point, an interesting question. The only question we see in this psalm is, God, I want your presence. And it's not necessarily a question, it's more of a request again. And he's pleading with God to come and be part of his reign. And so when we look at the question number 7 in our systematic way of going through the psalm, it's what answers are given. Well, it's not really a question, it's more of a plea anyway, so we don't really see an answer to that. Now, in David's mind, I think his answer to himself is, when I fulfill these things is exactly when God's presence will be known. God will make himself known as I do this. Now, question number 8, what commands or requests are given? Well, as we just talked about, that verse 2, this middle part of verse 2, when will you come to me, really is a request, or a request more than a question. And so this is David asking God to come and make his presence known. And so we don't really see a lot of commands here or requests here. This is more of David declaring what he is going to do. And we'll get to that in just a minute. Number 9, what warnings are given? Well, when you look at verse 5, I think what you see in this psalm is a warning to those in David's kingdom. If you're going to practice some of these things, you should be warned. Look at verse 5. Whoever slanders his neighbor secretly, I will destroy. That's a warning to the slanderers in the nation of Israel. Whoever has a haughty look and an arrogant heart, I will not endure. If you want to be around King David, don't have a haughty look and an arrogant heart. Now let's think about both of those things of why David make that statement and make that warning to those around him. Well, obviously, the danger of slander, the danger of telling lies about somebody to tear them down, would be very problematic in a kingdom. It'd be very hard to know who to trust. It'd be very hard to interact with other people if other people were always lying about everybody else. So David doesn't want that. He saw that danger with Saul, even as Saul tried to destroy David. Saul got a lot of his followers to believe that David was an evil guy, even though David was an evil guy. David wasn't trying to do anything. So he saw the danger of that. That haughty look and an arrogant heart. Again, the danger of that, especially in leadership, especially as a king. Now, I think you could argue that David got a little arrogant in part of his reign, and that was a great danger to himself, and I think he would even admit that. Look at verse 7. No one who practices deceit shall dwell in my house. Again, the deception. Now we see a little prophetic part here too with David. David definitely deceived with his sin with Bathsheba, and unfortunately that happened. But we saw the danger of deception with David and Saul, and so you can see why he would include that in this psalm. No one who utters lies shall continue before my eyes. Again, the danger of someone who lies to you as a king would be very, very problematic to the kingdom. And so David's calling that out. Verse 8, morning by morning I will destroy all the wicked in the land. Now David's job as king, as we looked at on Sunday, part of the job of rulers is to punish evil and reward good. So part of his punishing evil is to that idea of that he's going to destroy the wicked. Cutting off all the evildoers from the city of the Lord. So he says, I'm going to clear these people out that are trying to do evil. And so this is a warning to these people that would do this. If they're going to do those things, David says, I don't want you around me. And I'm going to work to uncover it and to destroy it. All right? So there's the warnings. Comparisons, and we limit this to similes, metaphors, and I don't see any similes or metaphors in this psalm. So we don't have a lot of that. Now we do have a contrast, and I want to look at that. That's our question number 11. What contrasts are given? And look at verse 6 compared to verse 7. I will look with favor on the faithful of the land, that they may dwell with me. He who walks in the way that is blameless shall minister to me. Now, there's verse 6. Now verse 7. No one who practices deceit shall dwell in my house. You see the connection there? If you are faithful in the land, you can dwell with David. If you practice deceit, you can't dwell with David. Last part of verse 6 says, he who walks in the way that is blameless shall minister to me. Last part of verse 7 says, no one who utters lies shall continue before my eyes. So again, you see the connection there. David says, here's what's going to happen. If you are good, I want you around me. I want you to minister to me. I want you to dwell with me. If you are wicked, I don't want you anywhere near me. If you are wicked, if you are telling lies, I don't want you to continue to be before me. So you see the contrast there between those two groups of people. Verse 12, or number 12, I'm sorry, question number 12 is, what other illustrations are used? Now, this question we ask to look for like different ways, not necessarily similes, but different things that the author of the different Psalms brings up that shows us a picture of what he's trying to get across to us. And it works in different ways. But I think what's interesting in this psalm is that David is basically giving illustrations throughout the entire psalm of who he's going to accept and who he's not, and what he's going to root out and what he's not. And so the whole thing is really more of an illustration of how his reign is going to go, who he's going to reward and who he's going to punish. And so it's not the traditional way of looking at that we've always looked at illustrations, but I think you can see here the different illustrations that David's giving. Obviously, it's not limited to just this of how he's going to interact with people, but this an illustrative for illustrative purposes, this is how he's going to interact with most people. So that's question number 12. Question number 13. What causes and effects and reasons for doing things are used? Now, I'm going to go back to verse 2 that we already looked at. Oh, when will you come to me? In my mind, I believe that is the whole reason for this psalm. The whole reason for David to act in this way and to have his reign characterized by this psalm and these promises, it's all based on his desire for God's presence, in his reign and in his kingdom. And so his reason for rooting out the wicked and rewarding the good and surrounding himself with people that are wanting to do what's right, the reason even for verse 1, singing of his steadfast love and justice to God, is because he wants God's presence. I think that's really interesting. He wants God's blessing, and therefore he plans to operate his kingdom in a way that's pleasing to God. I think you can see that. I think you can even see that characterized in David's reign, for the most part. Now, obviously, we know he had some issues. He was not a perfect king, because there's not a perfect king besides Jehovah, our great God, Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. But David was a great king, a man after God's own heart, a man that really strove to do what was right for the most part. And he wanted to please God because he wanted God's blessing. He wanted God's presence. He wanted that close communion with God. You can even see that as he wants to build a temple for God, that he really did want that part of God's blessing. All right? What promises are given? Now, we've looked at this both ways. Sometimes we see a promise from God. Sometimes we see a promise made to God. Well, in this, the entire psalm is a promise to God. So everything is David saying, excuse me, this is what I'm going to do, God. This is how I'm going to serve you. This is how my reign will be characterized. And so the whole psalm is a promise to God. Okay? What advice, admonitions, or attitudes are given? And what we look for here in this question, number 15, is the idea of advice that the psalmist gives to us, or admonitions that the psalmist gives directly to the reader, or attitudes that he is playing off to the reader. And I don't think we see anything there in that. Now we're going to get to another answer to a question here in just a bit that'll hopefully give us kind of cover some area. But as far as directly given to the reader, because this is directed to the Lord, I don't think we see that. Okay? So question number 16, what paradoxes or hyperboles are used? I don't think we see any paradoxes or hyperboles. Sometimes we haven't seen those in a lot of Psalms, but I still think it's a great question to include. Number one, I love the word hyperbole. It's a fun word to say. But number two, I think it's interesting to see in some of the Psalms how that way to speak is used, way to write, literary effect is used for our benefit. But I don't see one here in this Psalm. What is the tone of the Psalm? Here's what I feel in this Psalm. I think this tone in this Psalm is a very determined tone. This is a commitment to God, and David is very determined to live this way and to reign this way. And so I think the tone that comes through is this very determined way to go about life. I know that the pressures on a king, well, I don't know, but I'm assuming that I'm not a king of anything, unfortunately. No one's trusted me with that yet. Wasn't born in the right family, I guess, for that. But the pressures of a king to reign in the right way have got to be great. And so David, I think he saw that with Saul and his interactions with Saul. That it's very easy for a king to kind of lose his way. And so I think we see in the Psalm a very determined David writing this saying, this is what I want. This is my desire. This is how I want my kingdom to go, my reign to go. So I think that's a tremendous part. All right, question number 18. Is there anything you found unusual or unexpected? Now, this we look for something that's kind of off the wall. And we see that in a lot of Psalms. Actually, is something that's like, well, how does that fit in? And there's one verse here that seems out of place to me. Now, you may not agree with me, and obviously the Holy Spirit didn't, and He's the ultimate author here. So I think we can figure out that it's really not out of place. But just in the reading of it, I look at verse 1, and it doesn't seem to fit with the rest of the psalm. I will sing of steadfast love and justice to you, O Lord. I will make music. And then he goes on to make promises about that appears to be about his reign. So it is interesting to me to see verse 1 included in this psalm where he's saying, God, I want to sing of your love and your justice and and I'm going to make music to you. Now, I guess you could argue, and here's what my argument would be against myself, is I think I'm doing that more right now during this time where I don't have anybody to argue with. It's kind of weird. Anyway, but I think what I would argue against myself here is that's part of David's reign, is even his making of music, and that he continues his relationship with the Lord in doing that. And he is wanting to commit right off the bat that this is part of his commitment to draw close to the Lord so that the Lord draws close to him. Or that he senses that anyway. I think that's a better way to say that. That he senses the Lord is close. Is his commitment to worship God in the way that he does. And I think that's a good reminder for us, by the way, that if we want God's presence known, felt, realized in our lives, it requires on our part of us opening up to the Lord and telling him how great he is. When people complain about feeling distant from the Lord, many times it's because that we, as the believer, have lost our focus in worshiping God, in serving God, in declaring to God his greatness. And as we forget to do that, it's very easy to drift away. And so I think that's the point here. All right. Questions 19 and 20, I'm going to ask for you to include in the comments, or as we meet in Zoom in just a little bit after this. But 19 and 20, if you're just watching and you want to make a comment, I would love to hear your comments here of what did you learn about God from this psalm, and then what lesson did you learn from the psalm? So those two things I would love to see in the comments. I want you to answer those. What did you learn about God from the psalm, and what lesson did you learn from the psalm? And so you answer those things, and I'll look forward to reading those, and we can all read them and be edified together as we go through that. All right? So at the end of this, we're going to have a little Zoom meeting, and I hope that you will join us as we have a time of prayer. And if you are interested in joining that, please just drop me an email, and I can send you an invite. My email is pb, as in Pastor Bob, at bethanyaltona.org. And so if you want to invite to that time of prayer, just send me an email, and I'll send you an invite to that. But we'll meet in Zoom, and we'll look forward to that. Okay? All right. You all have a great night. I hope to see you in just a few minutes. If not, Lord bless you. Read over this psalm again, and let's learn from it together.